Hey, good evening. Dr. Alan Christensen here with you, and welcome to our discussion on sleep and thyroid disease. So, really glad to be with you guys this evening. I'm with you all on Facebook, on Zoom, and Instagram, and just getting final connections in. And there we go. So, welcome, welcome. I'm seeing a lot of folks here with us in all these various ways, and many more coming on. And yeah, this is our third or fourth. I'm not sure. I've done several of these, but yeah, these are sponsored by thyroid specific formulations. And these are real in-depth discussions about key concerns for those with thyroid disease. And this is one of the broadest topics that we have because, this affects everyone. And sleep issues are a pandemic. I'll talk through some shocking stats about how common they are. So welcome aboard. Whatever platform you're on, hang tight. I'll be speaking for about 30, 45 minutes, and I'll grab some Q&A afterward. If you're with me on Zoom, there's a raise hand under participants control. And that's the best way to get a question in. I can go through as an order. We can have a live discussion in video in real time, and I'll give you some good insights. I see hands going up already. You guys totally have the right idea. You'll get first up in the queue. So yeah, pop your hand up. I'll grab those at the end. On Instagram, there's a link that I believe my team will put up in the near term where you can join us on Zoom if you like. Otherwise, put comments in there. I'll keep an eye out, try to grab some of those if I can, but hands are going up fast. So sleep. And this is a big deal. There's a couple of core parts of our body's function that when they work well, everything works well, and the body can just sort a lot of things out. But when they're off, it all falls apart, and sleep is one of those. Seeing a lot of folks come on. Hey, right back to you. Charles, I've seen you before here by the sea, many others. Good to be with you guys. We got a really good group on Zoom, got a bunch on Facebook, a lot more popping on Instagram, and happy to connect tonight. It's fun to have an excuse to be together. I did a lot of live events in the past, and I'm looking forward to the near term in which we can do these again. I'd love to see a bunch of you all in person and hang out and do things like this live. But right now, this is a good option. This is a nice way to still connect, and especially fun when I can see people talk on video. That's the next closest thing to being there in real life. So that'll be fun when we get to do some Q&As afterward. So yes, sleep is a huge thing, and there's so many overlaps between sleep quality and thyroid disease. Did you know your thyroid secretes melatonin? Maybe that's a step ahead, but melatonin is the hormone that is a large part of the sleep timing onset. And yeah, the thyroid makes it as well. It's not just from the pineal gland. We make the most of it from the pineal gland, a little tiny lump in the back of our thalamus. Sleep regulates the immune response. It also has a huge feedback on how the thyroid works, how much hormone it makes, how well it grows, how these hormones are circulated and converted. We're going to go into all that tonight. We'll talk through the prevalence of sleep issues, their connections with thyroid disease, and the important part, we'll talk about some really good solutions. I've thought through this a lot, and something that I've thought forever this has been very important. I think the awareness now is a little more prevalent. We've got some real good leaders, some good sleep researchers, and I've distilled it all down to like 6 real easy actionable steps. And given the myriad of sleep problems that can exist, these 6 steps are fine for any of them. There's no drawbacks. They can be useful for any way your sleep is not right. And as part of that, I'll talk through melatonin supplementation and some ins and outs of that. It's a pretty surprising story. It can work, but not in the way that it's commonly done. So let me just quickly talk about our sponsorship. The talk is sponsored by Thyroid Specific Formulations, and I'll discuss Thyrotonin, which is a new thyroid-specific melatonin supplement. Really, first thing of its kind, and we'll talk a bit more about that in some depth later. And those who are looking at it or debating about what they might need for specific thyroid supplements, take a peek at the quiz. We've got a really good quiz on the shop at Thyroid Specific Formulations. So that's shop.thyroid-specific-formulations. A bit of a mouthful there, but its name is what it is. And yeah, there's a real easy quiz. Just a couple questions. Oh yeah, there's a link right up there for how to get to that. Thank you, Josh. And the quiz will ask you just a couple questions. And at the end, it'll tell you what are your highest priorities and which things could combine well for you. Or if it's just one, so be it. It'll tell you that as well. But that's a simple way to figure out what's best. And the other option you guys have, just to mention this again, I practiced for 20 years, and loved every day of it. There's a few tough days, I guess, but no, I really enjoyed doing patient care, and I've missed it. I've stepped from practice just to allow the team to grow and to train other doctors and do more things like this to be less of a bottleneck. But I love just talking to people directly and trying to, be an unfair advantage in their corner, so to speak. So a little over a year ago, I started doing a few consults. And I'll do these when the schedule allows. And these are just, you and me one-on-one. We talk through your situation. I'll look over your labs and give some exact recommendations for you and give some action plans that your local doctors can help guide you on. And these are available. There's a couple more open still in the next few months. I'll probably close these out for the summer shortly, but there are a few more, I believe, for April. I think that's about it. But yeah, that's available. And one more quick thing to mention. We were doing a pre-order campaign at Thyroid Specific Formulations. That ended yesterday. So everyone who did order in the pre-order campaign, thank you for that. You were automatically entered into a drawing. And next week, I'm doing a topic on metabolism. We'll talk about weight and metabolism. And at the beginning of that, I will announce our 3 winners. So 3 people will get one of those second opinions with me for free, $790 some odd value. And just wanted to say thank you and give back and have a fun way to get things kicked off. So we'll announce that the first part of this next session, and that'd be really cool. So let's dive on in. And I want to make it to where this is useful, this is actionable, this is simple. I'll use a couple weird words here and there, but not too many. But I wanted to start with a quick summary of the protocol that I'll talk through more. And I'll brief summary of it, and I'll go through these elements in more detail and wrap up again with another summary, and we'll grab into your questions. So starting from the top, 6 big steps. First one is the timing. You want to be consistent at when you go to sleep and when you wake up, especially when you go to sleep. And I'll talk more about that. Second would be some carbs. You want some healthy carbs with your evening meal, and that allows nighttime cortisol levels to lower, which helps melatonin get its job done. Light. So this is important. The body's circadian cycle has to reset itself on a daily basis. If it didn't do that, it would drift off and get further out of sync with daylight and darkness. And light is what allows that to happen. So if we have bright light in the morning and then more darkness in the end of the day, we sleep better. It seems pretty simple. Well, bright light, however, doesn't happen indoors. So I'll talk about how we want to go about doing that as well. Temperature. And a lot of these things, if we think through, are things that our ancestors would have experienced automatically. They got colder at night. And so if our core temperature actually shifts at night, that's a big part of our circadian cycles as well. A couple more things are our daily habits, caffeine and alcohol. For some people, they're a big factor with their overall health and their sleep quality. And I'll talk about that as well. And last up, we'll talk about the role of supplementation and how melatonin, curiously, there's a lot of data saying that it could be helpful, but a lot of ways in which common versions can make things worse. So we'll talk about that in more detail as well. So for starters, how would you know if you're not sleeping well? Well, if you already know you're not sleeping well, it's already covered, right? But many people don't know that sleep is a part of their symptoms. They don't feel well in various ways, and they may not have thought that sleep was a part of that. And some of the big ones, fatigue, brain fog, weight gain. I'll talk about that next week too, but sleep can be a huge factor for weight loss resistance and easy weight gain. They've even shown that in animal models, you can make an animal diabetic with one night of disturbed sleep and then reverse that again. And correspondingly, appetite can radically increase. Chronic pain, we can see quite a bit more of that. Yawning in the day, that can be a more direct cue. And then gas and bloating. So a lot of folks are still jumping on, and welcome. Happy to have you guys. I'll just give you a real quick update. So here we are. We're talking about sleep. And this is going to be about the importance of it, done deal there, but some key action steps by which you can improve yours and how it ties to thyroid disease. So yeah, I'm going to talk for about another 25, 30 minutes, grab a few live questions. I'm with you guys on Instagram. There's some links on Instagram if you wanted to join us on Zoom. Same thing, Facebook audience, you can see the slides. Zoom audience can see the slides and also do the direct Q&A with me live. So that's the biggest perk there. In the Zoom audience, if you just come on, raise your hand. There's a spot under participant controls. You can raise your hand if you've got a question. And I see those. They go up in an ordered queue for me. And at the end, we will go through as many of those as we can. So that's where we're at. Moving on, this was some big symptoms of sleep that are not always that obvious. And I want to talk about just some ways in which we see this tie in with thyroid function. This was a pretty startling quote, was that we know that thyroid dysfunction of every type can affect the body all over, but sleep is one of the biggest things that gets impacted. And we know that it can have a huge effect upon how well someone can get quality sleep. And thyroid disease is one factor, but the world that we live in and modern life, it's almost like this perfect storm that almost seems made to keep us from sleeping properly. So many things get in the way of that. We have light, but it's not the type or the intensity or the timing of natural sunlight, or even the direction, believe it or not. Yeah, the orientation by which it comes into our eyes. All these things confuse our brain. Our brain was calibrated with somewhere around 1 million some odd years of exposure to the outdoor world. And now in the last, many decades, all that has changed. And we've not had time to catch up and adapt to that. We know that changes to our microbiome, noise pollution, medications, all these are things that are elements of things we've done to make the world more comfortable, safer for us, but they can make us not sleep properly. High fructose intake, believe it or not, environmental toxicants. These are all things that in various ways can impact our sleep. And so the timing, when we think about sleep timing, it's important to think about this in a couple of facets. So the first one is an idea called sleep pressure. And this is just how badly you need to sleep. So let's think about this in terms of an analogy with food and hunger. If you hadn't eaten for a few days, you could have pretty powerful hunger pangs whenever, right? And that's just because there's a high amount of pressure that's built up. You're ready for food. Now, let's say that you're eating normally, but it's lunchtime. It's the time you normally eat lunch. And let's say maybe you had a bigger breakfast than typical. Well, you still get hungry at lunch because it's lunchtime. So that's the circadian rhythm if we take the analogy over to sleep. So yeah, if you miss sleep for a long time, you're exhausted whenever. But apart from that, the body has a set time in which it goes through the proper sleep cycles. And we now know that there's these REM and non-REM rhythms that are each independently important. And sleep is refreshing when these things occur in their order and in their sequence. And for that to happen, it's got to be a predictable timing. It's got to be about when you would expect to be sleeping. Now, the two factors we control would be the sleep onset and then the sleep waking time, when we actually get up in the morning. And the more regular we are about those, the better quality our sleep will become. An odd thing is that our bodies naturally move towards a longer schedule rather than a shorter schedule. There's no clear reason why that is, but they do. So if we're not resetting our rhythm regularly, it drifts that direction. Now, the consequence of that is if our waking time becomes later and later, that's what we get used to as the new normal. So if you stay up late on the weekends, Monday through Wednesday, your body still thinks that that was the time to wake up, was like 9 o'clock. And so that 6 or 7 awake time is far too early. You're not ready for that. But the single biggest variable that predicts quality of sleep is the timing of just that, of your wake up time. So if nothing else can be controlled, keep that one thing steady. If you do sleep in on occasion, you'll always end up thinking that's the proper time to wake up. And if that can't work on a daily basis, it'll always be like jet lag. It's just like going from the West Coast to the East Coast, where you're waking up when you're not ready for it. When you're healthy and sleep is working well, you wouldn't need an alarm. Your wake time is pretty regular and you'll get up and you'll get going. So if you do need an alarm, and if you do wake up at different times throughout the week, that's a really easy strategy to work with. What tends to happen is that if you do stay consistent about your wake up time and you stop sleeping in, you'll start going to bed earlier. Your body will get more used to that rhythm. It'll stop juggling it around and you'll want to sleep at an earlier time. So it'll spontaneously help itself. And I want to talk a bit now about the role of good carbs and how they tie into this. So what happens is that there's a connection between our daily cortisol cycle and our melatonin production and our carbohydrate intake. Those things all tie together. So cortisol and melatonin, they're just like on two sides of a seesaw. In the morning, we make a burst of cortisol, and that also pushes down melatonin. That makes us bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. That's like our internal coffee machine, and we start our day and get going. And melatonin shut off, so we're wide awake. At nighttime, that reverses itself. Cortisol comes down, and that allows melatonin to make a nice burst. And we'll talk more about that. But that burst of melatonin is the main thing that starts us into the whole cascade of sleep. I've heard the analogy, it's kind of like the gun to start a race. So it doesn't make the race happen all night, but it gets everything else going. And once it does get going, the other events cycle upon one another. But cortisol has to go down before melatonin can allow itself to elevate. So where do carbohydrates fit in? Well, cortisol, it's a circadian hormone, but it's also what's called a glucocorticoid. And that means it's a blood sugar regulating hormone. So specifically what it does is that it pulls glucose out of storage and moves it into one's bloodstream. So if you're late for a meal or if you've had very little carbohydrate, cortisol helps. It raises blood sugar by first taking sugar out of storage. And if there's not enough, I should say glucose, if there's not enough glucose in storage, it'll break down muscle tissue and convert that into glucose. Now, that's essential because you've got to have glucose in your bloodstream. If there's not enough there, that's a fatal situation. So cortisol is a life or death hormone to maintain baseline levels of blood glucose. Now, that's good, but the drawback is if that's needed to be done later at night, that doesn't allow for proper melatonin production. So if we're making way too much cortisol later at night to help compensate for very low blood glucose, then our melatonin is not made properly. And it also then impairs our insulin metabolism. We need to have some level of insulin output later in the day to have a good amount of insulin sensitivity in the earlier parts of the day. This was a fascinating study. This was done in which they took a large group of policemen, actually, and they put them on controlled diets in metabolic wards, meaning that everyone got exactly what they were supposed to get. It wasn't like questionnaires or whatnot. And it was the same diet in two groups. The only difference was the carbohydrates were moved to the nighttime in one of the two groups. So the exact same foods, the exact same amounts of food, but one group got carbs at night. The other group did not. The carbs were either just spread out more evenly or were earlier in the day exclusively. And they saw how this affected many markers of overall health. What they saw was that this experimental group that had their carbs at night, they had better insulin metabolism, leptin levels improved. They saw significant greater amounts of weight loss. Actually, their body fat percents were several percent lower than the opposing group. They also saw more inches of waist loss, lower body mass index, 7 more pounds of weight loss. Yeah, all these differences just from changing the timing of carbohydrate. And all of these other shifts that occurred were many things in inflammatory markers, C-reactive protein, tumor necrosis alpha, interleukin 6. And these things correlate with quality sleep as well. And that was also one of the observed patterns that had shown up. In the adrenal reset diet, we did a clinical trial looking at the timing of carbohydrate and how that changed cortisol rhythms. And what we saw was just by timing to have some healthy carbohydrate with the evening meal, cortisol rhythms could improve by an average of 54%. And it didn't matter if the rhythms were always low or always high or backward. Wherever they started out, they moved at least 54% back toward normal just by that one change. So this is a big thing. In terms of action items, just that, have some good, healthy carbs. And to be a little more detailed, it does mean more so glucose-based carbohydrate. So this is a case to where fruit is a good food to have in your diet, but it doesn't really supply glucose. It's often higher in fructose. A little different per type of fruit, but your best sources of glucose are going to be legumes, intact whole grains, and then vegetable starches, squash, sweet potatoes, regular potatoes. So having a serving of those in the evening can make a big difference. And a little more trick detailed too, there are those to where they'll wake after they've gone to sleep. 2, 3 in the morning, they get up and their minds are racing. In many cases, they're experiencing blood sugar drops that then cause cortisol spikes. And the cortisol spikes raise the blood sugar, but they also raise you. They wake you up. It's like it's in the morning. We've learned about this by watching people with continuous glucose meters. I first started using those in the late 90s, mid 90s. And I saw that a lot of folks who would wake up startled at night, they had a blood sugar drop right before then. So this is a time where resistant starch can be really helpful. And one of the easiest solutions I found for this has been our daily reset shake is to use half a serving of that right at bedtime. And the thought process is it's a small volume, so it's not a big amount of food or calories, but it's got enough resistant starch to keep your blood sugar stable throughout the night. So it doesn't plummet, and therefore it won't have that cortisol spike emerge. So yeah, that's not a sedative, but it does make it to where those who wake up alarmed and startled tend not to do so. They have steady blood sugar and easier cortisol. Sometimes the same thing can manifest as nightmares or night terrors as well, or just nighttime anxiety or palpitations. Now I'll talk a little more detail about light and sleep. I mentioned that briefly. The action steps there are to get something like sunlight in your first hour of being awake, and at least half an hour is what makes a big difference. So something like sunlight. Well, sunlight is the best thing. That's the easiest thing. Lacking that, indoor light doesn't tend to do the job. You can have really intense, bright indoor light, but the actual measured light intensity in terms of lux is not even in the ballpark of what it is from sunlight, even on a cloudy day. So get outside first thing in the morning. And if you live somewhere to where you're awake long before the sun is, get out when the sun is coming up anyway, even if it's a little after you would wake up. Even half an hour. And for this to work well, it's really light to enter your eyes. It's not a matter of bronzing in your Speedo, that's fine. But no, it's just really sun getting in your eyes. And you can even be in a shaded area, believe it or not, it still would work totally fine. So get some sunlight in that first hour of being awake. And the flip side of that is dimming the lights in the evening. Now, this is fascinating. Several years ago, when I wrote the Adrenal Reset Diet, at that time, the research thought that the problem with electronics was the type of light they emitted, was that the light was more heavily in the blue spectrum, like the light is in the dawn. Have you ever seen like nighttime or sunset? They call it the golden hour in photography. The sun is setting, the light rays are hitting at such an angle to where they're all red shifted. There's these soft, warm glow about everything. And the morning is the opposite. It's blue shifted. It's very bright and dynamic. So that blue light is a cue for us to be awake. And our electronics often do emit that. And now many of the manufacturers have done things to change what type of light they emit as the day goes on. So science has progressed, and we now know that being on electronics late at night totally goofs up your sleep. However, if you're on your electronics and you're using the special light adapted settings they have, it doesn't help at all. Or if you're even wearing like the blue blocker glasses, like the amber shade glasses that some of the biohackers were popularizing for a while, those don't actually help, we now know. So it wasn't really a matter of the type of light. It was a matter of the fact that we were just up and being mentally stimulated. So yeah, turn down the lights at night and put the electronics away. And how long? Well, an hour will make a big difference. An hour and a half will make even a bigger difference. So yeah, your last hour and a half or so, wind the day down and make a bit of a ritual. And I'll talk about some more elements of that ritual in this next section because that ties in. Reading a book is actually a good thing. I'm not pushing products, but Kindle readers that don't have light, they don't generate light or don't generate much light, those are fine. But yeah, just like any kind of something that's not emitting light and allows you to relax. So not watching movies, not texting, doing things, reading or writing or journaling or talking to people or playing games or, taking it easy, but wind down and lower the lights for that last portion of the evening. And it's a ritual that I think if you pick it up for a while, you'll want to stick with it, but the quality of sleep gets so much better and the timing of sleep, your sleep onset becomes so much faster from that one. So now a related idea is about temperature. Our ancestors, they got cold at night. There was a woman who was a patient. She was a native to the Phoenix area. And she grew up here long before electricity and air conditioning. And I asked her about that. I said, well, how did you guys get through the summers? It was pretty brutal still. Like it wasn't quite as warm as it, with all the the surfaces of the buildings or whatnot, but it was still pretty hot. And she said, well, we were hot. That was all they could do. And so too, people got colder at night. That was just how it was. And our bodies expect that. So this has been researched quite a bit too. And we now know, this is a funny paradox, the most effective thing is to heat to cool. So if you heat by doing a warm bath or a warm shower, even on the hot side, what happens is it heats your skin on the outside, and that pulls a lot of blood from the inside out towards your body surface. And you become a giant radiator, and your core cools down. So there was a time where we thought that you had to plunge in ice or take a cold shower. That actually warms your core, believe it or not. But if you're in warm, cold water for a long time, it'd be different. But the normal use of a shower, no, it does the opposite. So quick hot shower, hot bath, and those things are naturally relaxing. We tend to like that. And that actually does do a good job cooling your core body. So kind of a funny paradox, which you warm to cool. So yeah, hot shower, hot bath before bed. And that's a great time to start dimming the lights, light some candles, read a book, make a cup of chamomile tea, build a ritual around that, and just see what a difference that might make. And the home as well. So the difference is somewhere around 5 degrees. Whatever you keep your home temperature in the daytime, make it at least 5 degrees different at night. And part of the whole thing of rituals and cues is that you can set these things so they're automated. So if say you want to go to bed at 10 o'clock, so set it to where an hour and a half before then, 8:30, the thermostat starts to change. And you'll hear the fan come on, it'll start to get cooler. And that'll start this whole sequence of events your body will remember. It'll become part of this whole Pavlovian automated response for you. So yeah, cool off, take a hot shower, unwind, do the whole nightly ritual, and it makes a big, big difference. Now let's talk about a couple of things that are big parts of our habits, but are worth being deliberate about. And first one I'll mention is caffeine. And really briefly, before I dive into that, let me do a quick orientation. A lot of people are jumping on with us still. So I'm with you guys on Instagram and on Zoom and on Facebook. And this is a deep dive webinar on sleep and its ties to thyroid disease, some good steps on reversing that, and the role that melatonin can play when it's used correctly. So that's the whole focus. And on Zoom, people are here, the participants, if you're just coming on, if you've got a question about this, you've got the option to raise hand under participant controls. So yeah, hit that button. And even though I'm not covering them right now, I'll see those questions in order and come back to those at the end. If you're on Instagram, you're welcome to put a comment in. I'll try to grab a few of those as well. But in a few minutes, I'll wrap up my discussion and grab some direct questions. I'm seeing some questions pop up on Instagram, and I'll cover. I saw a gut that I'll cover too. Okay, so caffeine and sleep. For a lot of folks, it's harmless. Coffee, tea, no big drawbacks. I just did a really deep dive literature review on both coffee and tea and their health benefits. Honestly, the health benefits of coffee are really not panning out. There's really no clear evidence of there being overall benefit when you really drill down the numbers. If you did, I would work harder to stomach the stuff. I actually love the smell and the taste. I don't tolerate it well. But if there were strong signs of health benefits, I'd probably make myself get over that and push through it. But there's really not. So yeah, just having had meningitis and meningoencephalitis a few months ago, it made me think again about all the things we know about long-term brain health and cognitive decline. So that was a big stress. And so one of the neurologists that I spoke to said that coffee was good for the brain. I'm like, well, I've heard that said a lot, and let me just update the literature. No, it's actually just not true. I'm not saying it's harmful by any means, but if it's something that you're doing for the health benefits, that's not a valid reason to do it. If it's something you tolerate and do well with, and there's no clear health detriments, there's not a strong reason to change. Tea, however, there are some clear health benefits to it, and they don't correlate with the caffeine. So if your goal is to get the health benefits, you can do decaf versions of tea and still get those benefits just fine. Now, as far as sleep effects and detrimental effects, again, many people, there's no detrimental effects. They can have however much they have and their sleep is fine. Or they may have caffeine and they may have sleep issues that are unrelated to their caffeine. That's totally possible. But there's a lot of folks that they either have a long-standing sensitivity to caffeine or they can develop one over time and not realize that it's a culprit. What happens there is each decade we live, our liver gets a little bit slower at metabolizing caffeine. And we can cross a threshold after which it takes us more than 24 hours to totally clear a dose of caffeine out. Once that happens, think about this. If it's more than a day to clear it, and we have some every day, we're building up a backlog. So someone can totally have a situation to where they've had a cup a day their whole adult life and never had problems with it. But now they have sleep issues. Maybe they've got hot flashes, perhaps anxiety and palpitations, and their sleep is off. They may have hit a thing called hepatopause. They may have hit that threshold where their liver, hepatic, has slowed down, and now the caffeine is acting differently on them. So if you do consume caffeine regularly and you do have sleep issues, here's one little question to ask yourself. What would you think about just skipping your coffee for a month? There's a couple typical responses, one of which is no big deal. Okay, let's put that here. The other one is full on freak out, like do not get in the way of my coffee. So here's the weird thing, you guys. If you're in the no big deal, take it or leave it, I would just bet the farm that it's not going to be a factor for you. It's not going to make a difference to cut it out. However, if you're in the full on freak out mode, if the idea terrifies you to give it up, just saying, it's going to change your life. We've had so many people who've done the metabolism reset diet. And part of that reset is to kick caffeine and alcohol for the 28 days. And a lot of folks have just fought tooth and nail. And I said, look, come on, you're a grown-up. Think about this. Why is your reaction so intense? Is it really that big of a thing to stop for a while? You can have it back. Why not just try that? If you wouldn't, just question your own resistance. Yeah, if the idea freaks you out, question that. Why should that freak you out so much? It's not a big deal, But if you do try it, anticipate about 3 weeks to give a full test for how it affects your sleep. I've had so many people that have had sleep issues to where it's completely changed their lives. And many of them afterward find that they can do fine having a little bit less each day, or maybe just taking a break 1 day per week. Yeah, I have no vested interest in you avoiding it. But I've had many people that say, hey, I'm just better off without it, and I feel better, and I'm less anxious and more alert, more sharp. I'd rather just avoid it. And that's okay too. But you can't make an educated decision if you haven't had a break from it for a while. So take a break, give it a 3-week holiday. And in doing so, make it a thorough test so you can really see how it's affecting you. What I mean by that is cut out coffee, tea, chocolate, any things that have caffeine. And again, you can have them back, but just test out and see if that affects your sleep or not. If it does, cool, you've got choices. If you don't test, you don't know. So it's worth looking at. Another big one that's a common habit is alcohol. And I want to talk about that. I opened the caffeine discussion with thoughts about health and whether it's health promoting. And I've followed this really closely for alcohol over the years too. I don't have any moral objections to alcohol. I think that tons of people can use it responsibly and have healthy, normal lives. I know also a lot of people have had very big struggles with it and it has wrecked their lives. So I've seen both sides of that. But for a long time, conventional wisdom was that a glass of wine does the heart good. We've heard that so much. It's not true. And now even the World Heart Federation has said the same thing, as has the American Heart Association. Wine and alcohol are no longer listed as things that are beneficial for cardiac function. In fact, we now know that any amount is detrimental to cardiac function and overall health and longevity. So why the flip? Well, here's the thing. As science evolves, we can look at things more closely. And there was a lot of data sets of large numbers of people. And what they showed is that if you looked at those that drank no alcohol and compared those that drank a little alcohol, those that drank no alcohol often had more death and more cardiovascular death. And the logical interpretation was, the little bit of alcohol must have been protective in some way. Those that drank a lot of alcohol always did much worse, but those that did a little were better than those that did none. So the thought was some must help. And then some thought to dig more deeply. And what they realized is that of those who didn't drink alcohol, there was different categories. Some people medically should not drink alcohol. They had liver disease, kidney disease. They were on medications that were not compatible with it. They had some compelling reason not to do so. Others didn't do so by choice. So if you reanalyze the data and you separate out those who chose not to drink from those who drank a little bit, those who chose not to drink but were medically eligible to, they were healthier than those that drank a little bit. So those that couldn't drink and had more negative health outcomes, they weren't unhealthy because they couldn't drink. They were unhealthy because they were medically ineligible to drink. So yeah, their complications that made them ineligible to consume alcohol, that's what made them die earlier and get heart disease. So it wasn't that alcohol would have protected them. It was that their issues were causing other problems. So yeah, that's what confounded that data for quite some time. And then in terms of sleep, pretty much everything we could talk about that we care about with sleep is worse with alcohol, even small amounts. And the closer it is in timing to sleep, the worse it is. So there's a thing called unrestorative sedation, which means that we're knocked out or eyes are closed, but the good reparative cycles are just not happening. Our body is not getting to fix itself properly. We see that poor REM sleep emerges, there's sleep fragmentation. And now we know too that the cardiovascular benefits are not present. And we also know that there's heightened cancer risks with small amounts, even breast cancer. So yeah, just know that if alcohol is something you've done for your health, it's not a valid choice. If your sleep is fine and you do some, perhaps that's okay, but just know that each amount is a stressor for your body. Now I want to talk a bit about melatonin and its role in supplementation. The body makes it to start sleep. And because of that, it's quite logically been used as a sleep aid. And there's been good data saying that there are some general health benefits. We know that sleep quality can get better. Sleep quantity can also get better. Cancer risks may be lower. There's lower risk of chronic eye disease, and also digestive function can improve from the use of it. We also know that there are thyroid-specific benefits from it. Those that can use that can experience larger thyroid volume, better metabolism of the thyroid itself, and better production of T4 and T3. The body can make both of those better and convert them more effectively. Now, here's where the wrinkle comes in. Here's the fascinating part of the story. This has been called the melatonin paradox. So those who supplement with melatonin, there have been papers showing that they're more prone to daytime fatigue, lower serum levels of melatonin, believe it or not, and also possibly worsening of autoimmunity. And this is the big paradox. So what happens is that the dose of melatonin correlates with serum levels. And when the body is healthy, it makes a spike, a little blip of melatonin for a brief period of time, and then it comes right back down again. And that's the top of a point right here. Very tiny doses of melatonin, like, obviously 0 micrograms has no change from a baseline level, but smaller amounts, you see that blood levels are even lower than baseline. And then at this low end of the dosing range, they rise rapidly to here at about 100 micrograms. And the higher the dose is, the lower the blood level goes. So why would you have a lower blood level with a high dose of melatonin? Like we see here, like here's a milligram, 2 milligrams, 3, 5, 10 milligrams. Well, this is the whole paradox. So melatonin acts via receptors. And these receptors, they're made to take it in. And there's a couple different types of them. There's melatonin 1 and 2 receptors. When there's a big surge of melatonin entering the body, the receptors just close up. And so melatonin can't really do the job that it would do properly. But the body's mechanism of eliminating melatonin is sped up. So where you want melatonin to go, they lock the door and they open the other door to dump it out. So that's the paradox. When with higher doses, there's actually lower blood levels. It's simply less effective. And it still baffles me to this day because there's no controversy. There's been massive amounts of data examining all these pathways, and we know this very well. So what happens is these higher amounts, they cause the side effects. They cause grogginess, they cause brain fog, they cause weird dreams. And that happens because melatonin is lingering in the bloodstream long after one has taken it. It's staying in the day, staying in the blood late at night and through the morning hours. And that makes the body unable to do the proper cortisol awakening response. So again, the healthy spike is what we should have, and we want to have that, but it's a dose-related response. So if you take a look, what I've looked at all these papers and seen this consensus about this 100 microgram dose having the biggest effect that's useful on adults. So that's what the new mixture is based upon. And there's also been talk about the idea of sustained release versus immediate release. And sustained release, the drawback about it is that like a higher dose, it leads to prolonged blood levels. Melatonin, again, it's like a gun to start a race. It's boom, there's a little blip of it and it's gone. We clear it. So high amounts or sustained release amounts, they delay. They're held in the body for far too long. And that's not what our body does. In the whole world of endocrinology, one of the biggest principles is we want to help the body replicate healthy function. And we want the hormones to do what they would do in a healthy person. And melatonin, we make a little blip of it right when we're getting ready to go to sleep. And that gives us our high serum levels. If we have higher amounts enter the body, paradoxically, there's lower blood levels. So the more of it you take, the more your body blocks it and dumps it. It becomes less and less effective. And pretty much all products are over on this side of the dosing range. What they do is they're not enough to give that abrupt spike, but they are enough to make the body resistant. So they can have some effects, but they tend to come along with side effects and with lower efficacy. So there's a lot of examples like this to where hormones, to where a certain amount does something and more than that does less of that same thing. Less of it does less, but more can do less also. And that's this big melatonin paradox. And I'm still baffled why this hasn't been embraced by every manufacturer that's been making this stuff. But yeah, this is the basis for thyrotonin. This is a microdose, immediate release, plant-derived melatonin. And use is simply one capsule once daily at bedtime, away from food. And what that does is this is that 100 microgram immediate release dose that will mimic your body's normal circadian surge of melatonin. You get that same spike and a quick drop off and no big negatives. This data is even more pronounced when we talk about adults who are over 40, over 50. We get to where we're more sensitive to high amounts, where they don't work as well and they cause more side effects. So this is a great fit for those who are helping to correct their cortisol metabolism, fatigue issues, sleep problems, and the timing of it is important. You would want this roughly at one's normal bedtime or within 1 hour before. So not much earlier and not later. It wouldn't be appropriate if you were way awake past the bedtime. It wouldn't be good to regularly use it then. But to regularly use it within an hour of bedtime at 100 microgram microdose, we can see a good, safe response and a betterment of overall thyroid health. So a quick recap. I'll recap the protocol real quick and grab some questions from you guys. Timing. Number one thing there is wake up at the same time. Don't sleep in sometimes. It will screw everything up, unfortunately. Have some healthy carbs at night. There's been many papers showing that keto diets, extreme low carb diets, the first thing that happens is your quality of sleep suffers. And that's because your body's making cortisol all day long, and you're using cortisol to break down your muscle tissue to make glucose. Glucose is non-negotiable. It's negotiable where you get it from. You can get it from your muscles or you can get it from some rice, but you're going to get it either way. If you get it from your muscles, you're losing muscle tissue. That's the drawback. Light. Yeah, go outside in the morning. Put away the electronics at night. These things are really big factors. And then cool off the house, cool off your body. Have a quick hot shower at the end of the day, hot bath. If you do regularly use caffeine and alcohol and your sleep is an issue, give them a break for a while. Give them a break for a good month and see what happens. And if the idea of giving them a break freaks you out, think about that. Really think about that. Should it freak you out? Why would that be that something can have that much control over you? Just give it a break and see how you feel. And last up, thyrotonin. Give this a shot. This can help reset one's rhythm. This can be safely used for episodic sleep issues or for ongoing sleep disturbances. Some stats that I saw in preparing for this just shocked me. The majority of modern adults actually have sleep issues in the course of a given week. Somewhere around 80% of people have between 2 to 4 nights per week of sleep that's of poor quality. So this is rampant. So yeah, take all these steps. And if sleep is an issue, consider thyrotonin as part of that. Okay. So I saw one, there it was. Yeah, from Shelley, CBD, helpful or harmful for sleep patterns. Shelley, great question. And I actually, there was some data looking at that. And the data we have suggests that it's clearly detrimental. I don't see that there's science suggesting there's big harm to it overall, but sleep quality, it's thought to be a bigger factor for the whole unrefreshing somnolescence, to where you're basically knocked out, your eyes are closed, but not so much getting the good restorative cycles. So kind of like alcohol in that sense. Okay, so that was that one. And they'll let us stay on Instagram for a couple more minutes. So I'm going to open up to live Q&A with my Zoom audience. In the Instagram world, hang tight with me. I'm going to be able to hear the questions. The audio won't come through directly, but I'll repeat those so you can hear those too, and we'll give some answers to those. So here was just one more on Insta real quick. Valerian root, fine and harmless, gentle sedative. Not as much high quality research on that. And I like the idea of melatonin specifically because of its overlap with thyroid function and the fact that the thyroid does secrete it. But yeah, certainly valerian can be a harmless enough thing. It is a sedative, and some do notice some daytime sedation from that. And one other one, infrared sauna, part of nighttime ritual, would be a good idea. Sauna energizes and disrupts sleep. If you're in that for long enough, you could start to heat your core. So that's just a consideration. A great thing for detox and general health, but I would do more something that just heats just externally, like a quick hot shower, or the sauna. If it were brief enough, you might get a similar effect. So yeah, try and give us feedback on that. All right, so now I'm going to pull up my friends on Zoom, and I see a bunch of hands up here, and let's grab some sleep questions. I've got a long list of these. I will get through as many as I can. And I might have, if you guys have been here before, welcome back. I balance two things. So I'm balancing giving you really good, thorough personal answers and a lot of one-on-one attention with also trying to cover as many questions as I can. And those are at odds with one another. So please, if I do call on you, be ready to unmute, see if your mic is ready, your mic can work, and let me have your question. Ideally, a question is a sentence or so, and it ends like it had a question mark that I could hear. And I'll give you a good, thorough answer, and we'll do as many as we can tonight. And if you're someone that we couldn't get to this evening, please know that my heart is in the right place, and I want to be thorough. So hang tight. And my thought too is that in many cases, if I'm thorough with some questions, it'll probably cover some other ones that maybe I did not get to. So that's my hope. All right. So Jordan, I see you up first on this list. So I'm going to ask you to unmute. You can do that on your end.
Hello.
And lower hand. Oh, one more thing too. If you are with me on the Zoom for the question, if you can join on video, fun to see your smiling face. In some cases, you weren't planning on that. Video's not set up. Maybe you're didn't really get ready for that today. It's all totally cool. So I'm fine either way. But if you can say hi in video, love it. So go for it, Jordan. I'm all yours.
Hi, I'm feeling a bit shy.
No worries.
So I am naturally a night owl, and I have been since I was a little kid. I think more clearly at night. My energy is more calm. I feel more productive. I prefer the night. So that's just my natural state.
Sure.
However, I do have some health conditions that lend itself towards getting a second wind, specifically mast cell activation, EDS, dysautonomia. And I struggle with getting a second wind around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips to combat that?
So your sleep timing, does your overall work and life schedule allow you to sleep when you prefer to?
Yes, I have no restrictions regarding, I can set my own schedule.
Okay, but you would prefer to sleep earlier than your body wants to sleep sometimes. Is that what it sounds like?
I have some pretty severe insomnia that has crept to worsen to now I don't get to sleep till about 5 a.m. And I want to change that. I would rather get to sleep around 11 or midnight if possible.
Okay. Of those 6 steps I mentioned, are there some of those that might not apply, or maybe you've not done just yet? Or what are your thoughts that way?
I think there are so many that I can apply and try that I haven't done. So I definitely have my to-do list. However, the second wind it's where I get really, I can start to get sleepy. And then suddenly around 10 o'clock at night, I just get re-energized.
In almost all cases, that's an issue of a morning cortisol awakening response not happening right. So a lot of stuff in the morning plays out in that second wind phenomena. If there's not a morning cortisol spike, there's often a minor one that happens later in the day. So the total day's cortisol secretion tends to be preserved, but it's pushed till later and not as much happens earlier, basically. So the single most useful thing can be that morning light, that particular one. All those steps are useful. Let's say you went through all 6 steps and you still saw that happening. There's a procedure called wake therapy. And it's a pretty detailed protocol. I've written about it in very extensive detail. If you were to Google Alan Christensen wake therapy, it walks you right through it. It's not easy, but it's incredibly effective. I would bet, though, that those 6 steps, you probably wouldn't need it. But just in case you did, you got something to fall back on.
Great. I do have a question about your pill, though. I forgot the name of it.
Thyrotonin.
Yes. I actually struggle with pills getting stuck in my throat.
Sure.
And I usually do need to follow it up with a couple bites of food. What is your recommendation for people in that situation?
No problem. That one doesn't have to be away from food. A trick that might be useful for you too, in a lot of cases, if the whole capsule is slipperier, it can be less of a factor. So many capsules you can put in water, and I do a small amount of water, like just half of a cup or so. Slosh it around really good with the water in the capsule. Give it about 30 seconds, not too much more. Slosh it around some more and just drink the whole thing down. And what happens is the capsule got all slippery and coated and the water washes it down. Sometimes that totally solves it. If you still need some food, though, not a problem for that one.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, let's see. A couple of good questions here from Jordan. Now my questions disappeared. Oh, here they are. Okay. Let me just remute real quick. And Maritza is with us tonight. I think I've seen a few questions from you on social media recently, so that's cool. Maritza, I'm going to ask to unmute and go for it. What do you have for us this evening? Maritza, if you can hear me, you are up next. You've got to unmute on your end.
I didn't unmute.
There you go.
Dr.C. I have terrible insomnia. I always have been a light sleeper my whole life. But in the last 6 months, my insomnia is terrible. I think it's because I just realized that maybe my thyroid is not working correctly. And so I have trouble falling asleep. And I wake up like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I cannot sleep anymore. Sometimes I don't sleep at all the whole night. Sometimes 2 days, 3 days. And so do you recommend I use the Dream Sleep bundle with this product?
So the question was really about with poor sleep. Maritza mentioned that she may have a hard time getting to sleep at all. It might be many days without any quality sleep. And if I recommended a bundle for her with the product, I would even start with just the thyrotonin by itself. In many cases, that can help the body get that timing back in place again. And it sounds like that's the biggest factor for you. Something I mentioned briefly that I didn't expand on a lot earlier was about the idea of resistant starch. So I used to track a lot of people with their 24-hour glucose. And the devices I used back when, they're much more commonly available now, but they would allow people to make a timestamp when they had some unusual symptom. So they were wearing this monitor and they would press a button. And then afterwards, we would see a graph of how their blood sugar fluctuated and when these various symptoms emerged. And what I saw really commonly is that many who would wake up at night after they'd gone to sleep, like you were describing, they had a rapid change in blood sugar. Sometimes their blood sugar didn't go to an unusual number, but the rate of change was very fast. It just really plummeted quickly. And then right afterwards, it came back up again. Now, if we could see a full spectrum of their body's endocrine balance, what happens in those cases is the body uses cortisol to elevate blood sugar. So when blood sugar starts plummeting, our adrenals dump out the stress hormone cortisol to raise that back up again. And if you get a burst of cortisol in your body at 2, 3 in the morning, you wake up in a panic. Your heart might be racing. You might find yourself in the middle of a nightmare. You might think that, was there someone at the door? Is the stove left on? Your mind is racing to figure out, why am I in this panic mode? And in many cases, that's completely remedied by just the blood sugar being more steady. So the carbs at night, like I talked about, that can be step one. a dose of resistant starch right around bedtime, that can be a step 2 if needed. The daily
around
research.
bedtime or just with dinner?
So the resistant starch, this is a kind of carbohydrate that gives long windows of steady blood sugar. And really any time of day can make your blood sugar more steady at every other time of day. It makes a coating around the intestinal tract that delays gut uptake of carbohydrate and it lowers insulin output. So even in the morning, it can help. And sometimes that's all that it takes. But if someone's doing like a lot of bright stuff already, they can often do a little dose of that right around bedtime. And for the next 9 hours or so, their blood sugar just really can't drop off. They're getting this slow, gradual trickle of glucose into their bloodstreams that prevents that. In terms of how to do that, a lot of the denser food sources of that can be things like white beans, boiled potatoes, underripe bananas. Our daily reset shake's been a really popular way to do that at bedtime because it's just an easy thing to get down. And in that case, you don't even need the full serving. A full serving of it is 2 scoops, but 1 scoop with just a little bit of water, so you don't have to pee right afterwards. And then right about bedtime, that gives you that coating of resistant starch, so you won't get those drop-offs at night. So that's a good combination for what you're describing.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're
Can
so
I ask
welcome.
a personal question?
Well, it's just you and me here. Why not?
Yeah. Because
No one's going to know.
Confused. I am very confused. I don't know if I have hypothyroid or hyperthyroid.
Hypo or hyper? Do you take any thyroid medication?
No, this is new to me. That last October, I had insomnia, I had nervousness, I couldn't sleep, I have dry skin.
Do you know how your thyroid blood markers? Do you know how your thyroid blood markers were?
I got my thyroid markers, and they were normal except for the TPO was 32.
Okay.
And the thyroglobulin was 77.
Okay, so Maritza's saying she's not sure if she's hypo or hyper. She had normal blood markers, but she had thyroglobulin and TPO that were low positive. So you wouldn't necessarily be hypo or hyper. There are some arguments that even in the normal range, people can be a little high or a little bit low. So there's that. But just for starters, you wouldn't be badly hypo or hyper, but you would have early autoimmunity. You would have the autoimmune markers that could most commonly lead to hypothyroidism. And
hypo?
Yeah. So with markers, with levels like yours.
I have so nervous? Why do I'm so nervous?
So a couple of thoughts in terms of symptoms, and then I'll grab the next question after this. So some people can have symptoms from their antibodies being really high. Yours aren't high enough to where I would necessarily say they would be culprits. Usually that's when they're up in the many, many thousands. But there can be other conditions that are there causing that. So some of the things I mentioned tonight could be relevant. People can have caffeine, alcohol sensitivities. There's a big long list of possible causes, though. Yeah. But I wouldn't think about the thyroid being as big of a culprit in a case like that.
Oh, I was planning on taking the hyperthyroid support, so then I shouldn't.
The thyroid the daily reset bundle, the micronutrients would be a good thing. I wouldn't recommend hyperthyroid support for you though, because if your blood levels are normal, that wouldn't be a useful thing.
What about the antibody support?
Antibody support could be fine. That could cut your odds of the antibodies developing, but that would be the main thing that would be relevant. So yeah, good.
Oh, but I forgot also to tell you that my ND gave me glandulars after that.
Yeah,
and then my TSA dropped to 1.4.
I remember that discussion from last time.
Yeah, you told me to stop it.
Just don't take those.
And I did stop it, but how long does it take to recover, do you think?
Take a few months to see blood levels normalize sometimes. So yeah, good questions and very important ones. Let's grab a couple more here. Where are we at on time? Okay, so Instagram folks, I saw another comment or two. Let me grab those because I know we're just about to get booted on Instagram. We're almost at this hour mark. White beans, what was the other thing? I missed that. Yeah, so white beans like navy, northern, cannellini, or white beans, boiled potatoes, and then unripe bananas. Those are by far the 3 densest food sources of resistant starch. So food sources of resistant starch, how much before bed? Yeah, just 1 serving of those foods can do that. So Instagram friends, we're about to get cut off there at the hour mark. I'll be on the Zoom for a little bit longer. You're welcome to come on over, but I'll be back next week. Next week is going to be metabolism. So fat loss, weight loss, all things about that and ties to thyroid disease. This is a big topic, super important one to all of us. So come on back and love to see you guys then. All right, have a good night, Instagram world. Okay. So next up, we had Nancy iPad. I'm guessing iPad is not your given name, Nancy, but let's hear what you got. Nancy, can you hear me? Can you go? I asked to unmute. You can unmute on your iPad. And if, tech things can happen. So if it doesn't work out, I will just move to next in queue here. Okay. So Nancy's iPad is not behaving. Technology does that stuff to us sometimes. Let's see if Stephanie has something for us. So Stephanie, I'm going to hit ask to unmute and go for it. Looks like you jumped right on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Stephanie.
So, hi. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for your time. So I believe my Graves is stress related. Was induced by stress. I had a head trauma, a brain injury when I was a teenager, and so I feel like when I have issues, it's stress related. So and like sleep and insomnia. I do have my thyroid levels were very low earlier on when I was tested. I got pregnant, even though I was 46.
Wow.
Because my levels were normal, and so my thyroid was in remission during that time. And then afterwards, I tested again, and they just came back that my TSH was 0.21 and my T4 free was 1.1. So I'm wondering.
Sorry, that was during pregnancy or afterward?
No, just now. I got pregnant my son is one and a half, so I'm just kidding over.
Okay, so this is post-pregnancy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess I'm curious, what would help me sleep better and help me deal with stress if it is thyroid related? Sure.
Yeah, for sure. Follow up with your medical team. It sounds like there may be some recurrence of hyperthyroidism, and not an uncommon thing. Consider hyperthyroid support as an adjunct for that with the daily bundle. But then in terms of sleep and stress, the thyrotonin can be a useful mixture along with that. And that's a common consequence of hyperthyroidism, is that just anxiety, panic, and racing heart, and sleep can go along with that as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I will look into that then. Thank you.
You're sure welcome. Good luck with things.
Thanks.
Okay, remuting. Let's grab a few more here. Catherine is with us. I'm going to try to take a peek at the chat every now and then too and see some things if I can there. I can't always get to those as well, but I'll watch for those. But Catherine, let's see what you have. Go for it. I'm going to hit ask to unmute, and you jumped on it too. So go for it. Let's see what you got.
I don't have a video that works, so you can't.
Okay. You're forgiven.
I've been on a long journey. It started when I was 10. I was diagnosed with pernicious anemia. But the problem was we weren't told that it was autoimmune. So I went 41 years without proper treatment.
Wow.
And just recently, I started getting ill in 2001. And then in 2005, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto. And then in 2015, I was diagnosed with celiac disease.
Okay.
But one of the things that happened was 5 years in, my sleep pattern changed from, I used to go to bed at 11 o'clock and to get up at 6 and 7 to go to work. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden within the 5 years, it started changing, and it was gradually at first. It was like 12 and then 1, and then it got to 2, and then it completely switched. So now I wake up about between 10 and noon.
Okay.
And go to bed between, it depends on the time change, 5 or 6 in the morning.
Okay. So your sleep cycle is pretty much backward, it sounds like.
Another thing I want to mention too, that I've been told I have low cortisol, and that 3 medical doctors have said that my adrenals are just barely working. I shouldn't be alive. But we tried with my doctor that I've had for 16 years, to change it using melatonin. It didn't work, and some other things, and nothing's worked. And so I'm exhausted from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed. And
so if I could summarize that, basically your sleep cycle is backward and your cortisol levels are low. Would that be fair?
Since I was a kid, I've been waking up since second wind at 9 o'clock.
So this has been long standing. Okay. So a couple thoughts. The cortisol, important thing to make sense out of. It's important to distinguish low cortisol from the adrenal glands being damaged and not being able to work from low cortisol from the body trying to intentionally lower cortisol. They're completely different in how they should be treated. And doctors that know about distinguishing that can use a blood marker called ACTH to do so. But it's a pretty easy thing to do. Most commonly, low cortisol is because the body is adapting to it and doing it on purpose. But in some rarer cases, there can be an autoimmune process that inhibits the body from making cortisol. The first case, it's more a matter of adjusting the daily rhythms. The second case, the body really needs cortisol replacement therapy. So that's an important thing to sort out. If your medical team, I don't know if that question's been answered for you, but that's an important one to get answered. What state are you in?
I'm in New Hampshire.
Okay.
But my doctor is in Massachusetts.
Okay. So if you've got a good endocrinologist, they should be able to answer that question for you.
I don't have an endocrinologist because I went through 30 doctors before I found this doctor, and it was I was 2 months away from a coma by the time I found her. Okay. Nobody would listen to me because I lost weight instead of gaining weight.
Sure. So that's an important thing to really have explanation for. So you're welcome to look at a consult. I could help sort that out with you in that context. Or if you want to just find another local endo, that's an option too. But that'd be a good question to answer for starters. If it were a matter of the body not being able to make cortisol, that's a life or death thing. That's more common in those with other autoimmune diseases, and it does take direct treatment for that. If it's more a matter of the body choosing not to, that's important, and that can certainly influence the symptoms you're describing. The adrenal reset diet and the concepts around the crashed chapter, they talk about lifestyle steps when that is the case. Now, you mentioned how melatonin was not helpful. No. I would bet anything that the dose you took was in that 1 to 5 milligram range, because that's pretty much the dose of all products.
I think it was a sustained one too.
Sure. Yeah. So you heard tonight why those things commonly don't work, even if melatonin might. So that still may be a safe option for you in a microdose, but it would be important to really understand why your adrenals are doing what they're doing as well. So, yeah.
So I think it would probably be, I bought some of your books through the years, but maybe I should consider buying the one on the adrenals, the reset.
For sure. Yeah. And with that one, there's good discussion on, how and why and all that in the first few chapters, but then the later chapters are on different patterns of adrenal dysfunction. And what you're describing is called the crashed pattern. And that whole chapter, there's a lot of really steps that could be useful. Now, if it were the case that your autoimmune disease was damaging your adrenals and they could not work, all those steps can be useful, but they're not corrective by themselves. So that's the important thing to medically distinguish still.
Okay.
All right.
I appreciate that.
Take care of yourself. You bet.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, we've got Lee with us tonight. Let's get a couple more questions. Let's see what Lee has. I'm going to ask to unmute, and you got it. Good job. Lower hand and go for it.
Dr.C, I'm 73 years old, and I experience hypothermia while sleeping. My normal core body temperature at my old age is about 97.2, and I think that's not bad. But while sleeping, my core temperature can go as low as between 91.2 to 94.6.
How do you measure your core temperature while you're sleeping?
Oh, no, I mean, it's like I wake up and I immediately measure. I keep I wake up very cold, and I keep a thermometer. So it's a special thermometer that goes below 95. So,
and how does that you have to measure? Is it oral or topical?
It's oral. But now my thyroid blood work is all within normal range. But I do have a 3 centimeter benign thyroid nodule. And in case it matters, I also have a euthyroid TED with proptosis and lagothalmus. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I'm euthyroid. So
the low temperature, you wake up and you're quite cold, you're saying?
Well, sometimes I'm not even quite cold. I feel normal. And I take this, and, I heard if it goes under 92, you can go into cardiac arrest. Are
there other symptoms you're struggling with, or is it mostly just the temperature that's puzzling you, or?
Well, during the daytime, sometimes it drops, as low as 95.4, but it rarely goes below 95. I don't think it's ever occurred.
It's mostly you're puzzling with your temperature, but are there symptoms? Or I'll talk about that, but I'm just wondering if this ties to particular symptoms or other concerns, or it's more so just the temperature by itself.
It's just the temperature by itself. And although I could sleep, I mean, I get kind of awakened and then I can go back to sleep because I'm a good sleeper. But I'm just so worried that if I go back to sleep, it's going to go even further down, plummet. So I don't know what could be causing this. Do you have any idea?
I do. And the cure would be to go over and take away your thermometer. Believe it or not. Please forgive me if that sounds too flip, but I'm going to put up an article. We've got this idea of 98.6, and there's been some things written in the thyroid world how we need this narrow range of body temperature for good health. And it surprised me. I was taught that early along by Dr. Broda Barnes and his work. He argued that if you're outside of a range of 97.6 and 99.2, I think he said, that there was some big problems to address and to be concerned about. And I was exposed to that. I heard that as a resident, and many people would check their temperatures because of that. And I was surprised almost everyone was outside of those ranges. And so then I dug deeper into the whole thing about basal body temperature. There certainly are fluctuations that occur throughout the menstrual cycle. There is a valid role for fertility testing, but the range of normal body temperature is so much bigger than you would ever imagine. So yeah, I wrote about that in really exhaustive detail in the link I just posted. So I really wouldn't worry about that at all. If there are symptoms, concerns, by all means, take care of those. But I wouldn't change your habits because of your body temperature.
Well, I am scheduled to have thyroid eye surgery.
Okay.
My orbit's enlarged.
Okay.
So I'm worried. I know anesthesia has a profound impact on hypothermia. Is there anything you can suggest for that?
Speak to your anesthesiologist about that if that's a concern of his or hers. I don't really track people in those circumstances, but for just normal daily function for going out and about, being in the lowest 90 degrees, that's actually not unusual. That's not too unusual. So yeah, I wouldn't be concerned about that.
So when would I need to worry? When it goes below 90?
Speak to your medical team, but there's honestly not a point at where normal healthy people, low body temperature is an issue by itself. The exception would be hypothalamic disease, but that's so rare. And it's something that when someone does have that, they're not walking around and talking and wondering. They're rarely functioning at all metabolically. So yeah, speak to your team.
Hypo what?
Hypothalamic disease.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Could I just ask one really quick question?
Sure.
Do you recommend ablation therapy with my 3 centimeter benign nodule?
There's a lot of variables that go into that. And I can't say a yes or no in a situation just off the cuff. That's a size in which that is commonly done. There is a very substantial risk of there being cancerous tissue, and biopsies can't completely exclude that. So it's a very reasonable consideration.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's grab a couple more. How are we doing on time? Yeah, let's get another 5 minutes or so. I'm just preempting. I probably won't get through every one tonight. I'm sorry, but let me get a few more. Amelia, you are next up. I'm going to ask to unmute, and let's hear what you have for us this evening.
I'm sorry, I can't get my camera to work. But,
come on. Nobody's on camera tonight.
I tried. I don't know what's going on.
All right. Well, thank you.
Is it okay to take the thyroid melatonin that you were talking about tonight, along with metoprolol?
In terms of medical interactions, the best thing is always double check with one's pharmacist, but there's not typical interactions between melatonin and beta blockers that are known. So yeah, I can't say in a specific case, but that's not a classic known interaction between those categories of medication.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're sure welcome. Easy one there. Let's get Michael. We'll get a couple more. We're going quickly here. Michael, I'm going to ask to unmute and lower hand and go for it.
Okay, can you hear me?
I sure can. How you doing, Michael?
Hey, excellent.
No video for you either, huh?
No video, but that's okay.
I combed my hair tonight. Come on.
That's right. It's in Dayton, Ohio, so it's real dark and cold. So
okay. Hopefully you're indoors.
Yeah, we're indoors. Anyway, got a question for my wife here that's got some thyroid problems. She does have the sleep issue and wakes up 3 o'clock in the morning. And we are going to try your resistant starch and your melatonin. So we're going to give that a try. But she's got all the classical symptoms of thyroid, hypothyroid. She's got fatigue. She's got a tremor. She's got hair loss. She has a 3.5 centimeter nodule on her thyroid. She has eyebrows. She's missing part of her hair. She's got some memory problems and dry skin. So she has quite a few of those classical hypothyroid symptoms.
Sure.
And the thing of it is she has been waking up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning with the sleep. What we saw a naturopath, they said, well, it could be her mercury fillings. They've seen a lot of thyroid problems and nodule problems with mercury, the silver amalgam type fillings in her teeth. Mm-hmm. And we were wondering, because he said it could be mold, it could be this, and she is going to have some blood work for looking at the mold. And also, we're going to talk to a dentist that does the smart removal of the filling safely. But,
sure.
I don't know if there's any correlation, because we can do all this stuff with the melatonin and try to correct the symptom, but we're trying to get at the root cause of the problem and try to reduce the size of the nodule, whatever caused that in the first place. And we're thinking.
So in terms of cause of thyroid disease, and also a thought too is there are times to where causes of things may no longer be solutions. Like the saying about the horse is already out of the barn. If the horse is running down the street, closing the barn door doesn't help anymore. So it's always good to try to find a cause. There are times where the cause doesn't open up treatment options. When a nodule is extremely large, like more than many centimeters, sometimes even if one can identify why it grew in the first place, there's just a whole lot of extra tissue that's not going to go away, even if you take away the thing that got it going to start with. So things that cause thyroid disease, things that cause nodules to grow, please take a look at the thyroid reset diet if you've not done so. I've been trained in treating mercury, treating mold, all that stuff. And I thought really hard, what do we know really does cause thyroid disease? And other things that really do cause it, what are the things that can be helped after disease has started and can improve upon the disease? And there's a lot of data arguing that many different environmental toxicants are associated with the onset of thyroid disease. Totally true. And if one does have issues from that, it can certainly be worth taking care of. But there's not good data saying that treating those things reverses thyroid disease or makes it go away after it started. And mold exposure, so too. There are those that have mold allergies, and they can certainly affect many symptoms. But the data we've got about the drivers of thyroid disease that can reverse them, iodine's in a class by itself. We've got about 30,000 human studies showing that its levels being a little high or low is the biggest driver of thyroid disease, bar none. And not only that, there's mountains of data saying that correcting those levels after the fact can often reverse thyroid disease. Now, I say thyroid disease mostly referring to autoimmune thyroid disease, hyperthyroidism, hypothyroidism, also longer-term risk for thyroid cancer. When there's a lot of growths in the thyroid, regulating iodine can still help cut the risk of the growths growing, but it won't always make them go away when they're rather large. The main things that do affect nodules that are present, I'm not sure if you caught our nodule talk. I did do that one a few weeks ago, but the recordings are available. I'll make sure we can find those. But the biggest factors would be, the first one I mentioned was iodine, controlling that. The second is keeping TSH at a lower normal and reasonable range. Third one is maintaining healthy body weight. Even a small amount of extra waist circumference correlates with more nodular growth. So if someone has room to lower weight, that can improve upon them. And last big thing was the micronutrients in nodule control. They've all been clinically shown to help nodules shrink. So when nodules are really big, like more than several centimeters, it is still smart to track, to biopsy when appropriate, to consider procedures. What happens is bigger nodules can hide thyroid cancer. And there are times to where you can, if you see it there and if you can biopsy it and find it, you know for sure it is there. But when you're biopsying, you're looking at a very small part of a very big thing. So if you don't see it there, you can't always be certain that it's not there or that you just missed it. So it is still smart to take them seriously and address them with localized treatments as needed. But as far as lifestyle steps, those 4 things are much more documented than anything else to make a big difference with the nodules. Those steps are not invasive. They're very cost effective. I know that a lot of dental work can be a consideration. It can also cause the need for other dental work. But yeah, if the goal is really to help those nodules, I would just home in on those 4 areas.
Okay, that's excellent. I really appreciate that.
You're sure welcome. Best of luck to your wife.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Let's get at least one more here. Okay, so next up would be Charlene. Charlene. Of course, I always said Charlene, not Charlene. I'm being silly. Okay, ask to unmute and go for it, Charlene. I'm hearing some static, but I'm not hearing Charlene just yet. Any luck on audio there?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay. I tried to start my video too, but I'm not having any luck with that.
Well, let's hear what you got in the meantime.
Actually, I think you may have...
there you got it. Hey there, I can see you.
Okay. I can't see me. Where am I?
That's okay. I can see you, so we're covered between us.
I think you may have at least partially answered my question, which was just a short one. Does eating before bedtime affect sleep?
Well, it tends to have sedative effects, like mild sedative effects, especially when it's carbohydrate based. Now, of course, that's not a solution that one can scale, with no limit. You can always just gain weight by eating too much. But yeah, having some carbohydrate in the evening helps the body's normal hormonal change before sleep. It helps cortisol go lower and allows melatonin to come up and do its job better.
Any kind of carbohydrate?
Well, the ones that are slow burning and high in glucose are most effective. So sweet potatoes, some lentils, some brown rice, squash, those are great options that way.
Okay. Thank you.
You're sure welcome. I'm going to take a peek here and see if there were any things. I promised to look at the chat questions to see if I could help anything there. Does eating before bedtime, okay, that was the one I just covered. Does Synthroid have the opposite effect if you're taking too much? Palpitations, restless, like wired mean you're taking too much? So this is a thing. I want to read, this is from Sylvia. Does Synthroid make you stay awake if you're taking, does that mean you're taking too much? If you're taking too much thyroid hormone, it can cause those symptoms. However, if you're getting those symptoms, that doesn't necessarily mean you're taking too much thyroid hormone, if that makes sense. So yeah, the paradox about thyroid amounts and symptoms is that you can have symptoms of too much from taking too little, or from taking too much, or from something altogether different. So it's important to recognize that, hey, my medicine might be off. And you're totally right. Those symptoms do suggest your medicine could be a culprit. If your blood levels say you're getting too much, you're getting too much, and that should be changed. If your blood levels say you're getting too little, it's possible to get too little and have symptoms as if you were getting too much. But it's also possible to have your blood levels be just right and these symptoms be from some altogether different cause. So those are all possible. And I see a lot of doctors that they want to help, and they're quick to assume that if someone has this set of symptoms, it means their thyroid medicine should be adjusted in a certain way. And it doesn't always mean the same thing. So the symptoms are important, but they're not always specific by themselves. So one always has to interpret them in the context of their overall blood levels to make sense of that. So here's a good one from Linda. Melatonin increases thyroid volume. Your slide said, what does that mean? Is that bad for those on the hyperthyroid side of TSH? Does increased volume mean thyroid nodules? Yeah, great question. So melatonin is something that has more of a homeostatic effect upon thyroid function. So when the gland itself has atrophied or shrunken, having normal or slightly augmented amounts can raise the odds of it growing. But your question is good because it's not simply something that makes the gland grow wherever it is. If the gland were enlarged or nodular or goitrous, having normal or augmented melatonin would not worsen that. But if the gland has shrunken, it can improve upon that. And that's a cool thing about working with natural compounds in the body's own homeostasis is there is this innate sense of balance. And if we restore that, things can correct in ways that wouldn't have to worsen if they weren't needed. So yeah, good question. Let's grab one more live one here. Oh, here's another quick one about just timing, sleep and timing of Synthroid. I heard that taking it, meaning Synthroid, at night allows it to take effect better than in the morning because it needs more than 30 minutes before food to have best effect. Not sure if it's accurate. Wondering if I should change it from morning to evening. So thyroid medications don't work better at night. They work almost as well at night for many people. There are those to where they wake up and it's really tough for them to give that hour gap before they eat or have some food. And in those cases, nighttime dosing on the medication can be an option for many people. There's some to where nighttime dosing can disturb their sleep, actually, but there's not been data saying nighttime dosing is superior for people for sleep. So I wouldn't change it that way. No. All right, let's grab Neville's question here, and that might be our last one tonight. So Neville, go for it. It's all you. Neville's iPad. Are you still with us? Can you go on audio?
I'm here.
Here you go.
I'm here. I'm actually not Neville. I'm Dana. So Neville's my husband.
Okay. And I bet your last name's not iPad either.
It's not. It's not.
I'm pretty clever that way.
I probably know how to start the video, maybe too. Maybe I'll pop it. Maybe I won't. Okay. So I'm going to try to make mine quick because it's really long. But basically, I started thyroid medication a few years ago. I went to see a holistic doctor, and I guess my numbers wasn't having any symptoms, but I got started on a high dose of thyroid medicine, and
you weren't having any symptoms.
I was not.
Okay.
And so, but I also started on pellets, which I do not advise for anyone. I will never do that again. But anyway,
can I ask if they were estrogen pellets or?
They were testosterone.
Okay. Pretty high dose, I would guess.
Very, like way too high. By the time I got tested, it was in the men's range.
You know, Neville, I've seen a lot of people in that exact situation. And one of my lines was, they would be at a different doctor. So some doctors really dose aggressively with testosterone. And I think that they feel like they're doing a favor for women, but they're not. They can cause a lot of bad symptoms. But I've had many times where I've looked at a woman's blood test and I've said, yeah, your testosterone's higher than mine is right now. So that happens, right. Unfortunately.
So I think that's when my sleep started to be an issue. And I started doing what I hear a lot of people say, is that they're waking up at 3:00 in the morning. And long story short, I actually, I tried melatonin. I was obviously doing a too high of a dose. I kind of tried and played around with that altogether. My issue was not going to sleep. It was staying asleep. Sometimes I typically was waking up around 3, sometimes able to go back to sleep, sometimes not. But I feel like that when I started the thyroid medication is when the sleep issues started. And so now, fast forward, went to see an endocrinologist, titrated me down to the lowest dose, and was at 15 milligrams of NP thyroid, and was still having what I thought to be issues of basically a suppressed thyroid. And I was having, even at 15 milligrams, the whole palpitations, nervousness, anxiety, just crazy symptoms. Anyway, I got COVID in August.
Oh, wow.
And then here we go again. It's like I would get to like a stable spot, but basically I was fearful of getting off the medicine. So when I got COVID, I started losing hair again. And I was like, okay, this is my opportunity to get off of the thyroid medicine, which I had switched it from NP to Armor back in April. And when I switched it to a different brand, I wasn't experiencing the hyper nervousness and anxiety symptoms, but still having sleep issues. So anyway, I took the opportunity. I'm off thyroid medicine now, and my thyroid numbers look good, except for my T3 is high at the last time that I tested it, but T4 and T3 looked really good.
You cut for a second there. Did you say your reverse T3 was high?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was high for most of the time I was taking thyroid medicine as well.
Sure. Yeah.
So my issue now, as it relates to sleep, is that I wasn't sleeping well for quite some time, and it was obviously causing all sorts of havoc. And so my doctor started me on Xanax, and I am scared to death. I want to get off of it. I think what you described earlier, like with taking alcohol and like, yes, I'm asleep, my eyes are closed, but I still am waking up, usually around 3:00, but I'm able to go back to sleep because I'm medicated with a milligram of Xanax at night.
You're knocked out. Yeah.
So I'm knocked out.
Might as well be a 6-pack. It's about the same effect.
Right. So that's my question now is like, I feel like I probably need to do just a consult with you. I've been considering it for quite some time, but I live in Texas. And so I know I can't be a patient or whatever, but this has been so maddening. And I do know from about a year and a half to 2 years ago, I did do some cortisol saliva testing, and my cortisol was spiking at night. Okay. And so I don't know if it's going to be an easy reset, but like, I just want off of this Xanax so bad. I'm really glad that you asked this and we got to talk about this. That's a benzodiazepine. They're a big deal. And the data is so strong. They're not recommended for anything more than like just once a blue moon, a pill or two here or there. To use that medicine 18 times per year gives you a 9-fold increased risk of death overall. So it's a big deal. They're not safe. They cause brain damage. They cause dependency as well. So what happens is you take it at bedtime and it knocks you out, and then you go through withdrawals in the daytime and you become anxious, more panicky, and harder to sleep the next night. And it becomes a vicious cycle. So they're not at all recommended for ongoing use. If a consult made sense, you're right, I couldn't prescribe for you, but I could give every piece of advice that I could. I could give very thorough guidance in this whole process. Some general thoughts from what you said. It was very good that you were weaned off the thyroid medication. You probably never needed that in the first place. The Xanax and timing of it, there's another article I'm looking for right now. I put a few of them up, but I mentioned one briefly about wake therapy. And here's a handout of mine that was posted online that talks about the wake therapy process. Make your doctor aware of that. In some cases, benzos can be stopped abruptly. In other cases, they do require a taper. So talk to your doctor about what that could look like. But with wake therapy, one can radically change their whole rhythm, even when it's been thrown off badly. You might do well on those 6 basic steps. The thyrotonin might be quite useful by itself, but be aware of the wake therapy as a backup option for yourself as well. And if a consult made sense, I'd be happy to talk to you in person about those things in more detail. Okay, that's probably what I'm going to end up doing because I feel like this should be an easy fix. I think that the hormones just got, all out of whack. And now I'm on, oral estrogen and progesterone at the lowest doses, and then testosterone cream. I'm feeling like I need to be off all of that. Like, I feel like it's totally everything is messing me up. And I have read your adrenal fatigue. And so I read about the benzo, and I've obviously done my reading and research on it. But he promised that he was not going to keep me on this. And I've been wanting to get off. And he's like, it's the last thing that we need to get off of. But I've been on it since June, and we're talking every night. That's a long time. Yeah,
I would make that just like an immediate priority. I'm seeing a lot of questions pop in about consults. If I do consultation, how do you suggest talking to my primary care provider about changes? Can you consult, prescribe for someone in Illinois? Repeat the 4 things regarding nodules. So the consults, in those, I don't act as a prescriber. I'm not currently acting as a prescriber. I've retired from practice, but I'm kind of like a grandparent. I'll give like all the guidance, all the step, all the help, and spell things out completely on here's what I would suggest. And I'm happy to give summaries that one can relay to their primary care doctor. That's always helpful. So 4 things for nodules: regulating iodine per the thyroid reset diet, keeping TSH in a good range, nodule support, and weight loss if that is appropriate. So those are the big 4 ones. So that was what I had for tonight. There's a couple more questions, but good to see you guys this evening. I'll be back at office hours on Monday. You're welcome to grab any follow-up questions at that point in time. And also back next Tuesday talking about body weight. I saw Joanne's here. You're sure welcome, Joanne. Happy to help out. And body weight, metabolism, that's going to be next week. Super big topic, near and dear to my heart. Been a big, long, lifelong struggle for me. And I really get what a big deal that it can be. So thyrotonin, great option. Sleep is something that, a good quote that I had from one sleep expert that's a dear friend is that nobody has a broken sleeper. So no matter how bad it is, people can sleep. You can get your sleep rhythm back again. And these steps I mentioned are quite powerful. Medications are actually not very effective for it. They may give a few extra minutes of sleep, usually no more than that, but they rarely increase quality of sleep. But lifestyle steps, microdose melatonin, very good, powerful effects. What time is office hours? Yeah, thank you. So office hours, I go on Facebook Live and Instagram. Those are Mondays at 3 o'clock Arizona time. Is that right? I better check my schedule. I'm pretty sure that's when they are. I kind of look at my schedule a lot and do what I'm told, basically. I'm pretty sure that's 3 o'clock. Arizona time right now, we are on mountain time. So that would be like 2 o'clock Pacific. Yeah, 3 o'clock. So 2 o'clock Pacific or 5 o'clock Eastern. 5 Eastern. Joanne put in ahead of me. She beat me to it. 5 Eastern is when that is. So yeah, you're welcome to come then. See you guys then. And take great care in the meantime. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.